Money doesn't change men, it merely unmasks them. If a man is naturally selfish, or arrogant, or greedy, the money brings that out. That is all. Henry Ford. All right. Good evening. I don't get to say that very often. It's usually good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. Today is another episode of Dad Talk. Not the kind where I get on there and I talk about how cool of a dad I think I am. Dad Talk, the original one, is my series to bring on everyday dads to talk about whatever is important to them. The goal of Dad Talk is to raise dad voices, no argument, no debate, and my only requirements are that we keep it family friendly and whatever we talk about is related to being a dad. Today, Jay joins me in this episode to discuss setting your kids up for financial independence. So please welcome Jay to Dad Talk. Get these buttons going here, and I think I've got him on mute. Hold on, don't say hello just yet. Wait a minute. Did I get it right there? Click that button. I don't. There we go.
There we are.
All right. How are you, Jay?
Oh, it's been a week, but I made it. I made it to the end.
Yes. We had to work out the schedule. So here's like people that follow the show know that I'm notoriously terrible about working out schedules and stuff. It's just very difficult for me. It's an Achilles heel. And so I've forgotten some dads a few times. I've had to go back and apologize because I've made so many mistakes. It's terrible. But we made it through. And I just want to point out that on social media, Hot Temptress liked this post for this stream.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to block her because it's tempting, but it's just not going to work. So. But I figured I'd throw that out there. All right, how's it going? So, Jay, tell us a little bit about you as a dad. What's the scoop on you being a dad?
Well, not maybe typical, but not maybe that unusual either. Currently, my wife and I, we're not an original pair, but between us, we have 4.
Okay.
And so there's a little bit on my end of being a dad and also a stepdad, and there's some learning curves there and challenges there. Uh, in, in addition to just dadding in
Mhm.
general, just teaching kids kind of what you hope they need to know,
Right.
and helping them get through their stuff while you're also trying to get through your stuff. So,
So
um,
how many do you have? Do you have like 1, 12?
so I have one, and my wife has three that she brought. So,
Okay.
and they're all a pretty good mix. But right now, and I think we talked before coming on. Mine are all we are very close to being empty nesters is the thing.
Okay.
So we had one more still in the house that's in the end of high school, rather homeschool high school hybrid kind of thing we're doing, and so we're at that point where they were entering the workforce or have been in the workforce for a little bit, and we're
Mhm.
trying to get them in a good position to like every parent, don't make the mistakes I made,
Right.
that kind of thing. And uh,
Did you make a lot?
well, of course, we've all been in college and we've all thought, wow, I have a little bit of money. This is cool. I'm going to the club. I'm going to the,
Right.
I'm getting a pizza. I'm doing whatever.
I got
I'm making.
$300. Let me call my friends.
Yes, yes, that kind of thing. Oh, look, credit card, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And being at the point where our kids are adults, I was in college, a young man in my early 20s.
Mhm.
Dave Ramsey wasn't really a thing yet, or
Right.
and was maybe he was a thing, but he wasn't a cultural
Right.
icon. And so some of what we've done is like here. I live in Oklahoma, so we all live in Oklahoma in this house.
Right.
Uh, the state had put out a few years ago had started requiring financial literacy as a component for high school graduates,
Mhm.
and hilariously, a lot of the schools are using a Dave Ramsey program that's just like a secular version, I guess.
Right.
Um, but whatever your religious, you know, persuasion, I think everybody should probably take a look at it if they haven't tried it yet, or if they're so inclined. You can easily, if you're not interested in the biblical aspects of that,
Mhm.
you can take from it what you want because it's based on solid principles. And
Right.
I kind of wish that kind of thing had been crammed down my throat when I was in my 20s.
Mhm.
And I'm not blaming my parents or anything. It was just they
Right.
were a different generation. They were a different group, and I was away, so it wasn't like
Right.
they were standing on top of me.
So let me
Like
ask then, you were like, "Hey, I would have loved to have had this crammed down my throat." Did you cram it down your kids' throats, or how did you
we are
introduce it, or
really, really trying to just hammer them.
are you?
Well, I mean, you have to kind of know how to play it.
Mhm.
Some um, some will take your advice, and some, we have four. They all have their own personalities, and so
Right.
like my daughter, can't be played the same way as the older, the older one, or and of course, kids will all say, "Well, I'm only making, $8 an hour or $10 an hour, or whatever it is. I don't have enough to save. I can't possibly do it." And then I say, I kind of feel like that's not true. I think you can
Right.
put, you know, you kind of have to end up bargaining. You're like, maybe just look, take $20 and open an account.
Right.
Open a Roth at Vanguard or something. Just put $20 and then just wait, and then just sit back and let that roll for a little bit. But now you have the account, and now when it's kind of a mental barrier. I think I'm not saying it's this generation. I
Mhm.
think we've all kind of when we're in that young adult phase, a lot of the mental barriers are just getting started on
Right.
anything. So if we figured right now, if we could just get you started, can I can I sell you on a savings account that earns more than 0.005%, that kind
Right.
of thing. So, and sometimes you feel kind of like a crazy person because you're just repeating yourself all the time. Hey, have you opened that account? No. Like, okay. You thinking about not that we haven't had some success.
Right. I mean, I feel
But
like I've got a long, long road ahead with, have you done this yet? No.
now your kids, how old are they? They're
My son is, we have one, and my
yeah,
son is
yeah.
6. And
Oh,
I'll tell
now
him,
start
"Take the
now.
dog out to go to the bathroom," and then 5 minutes later, I'm like, "You take the dog out?" "No, not yet. I'm about to, though."
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
what is in between you doing that thing?
Right.
You know, what are your barriers?
Right.
You feel like you're having you feel like you're having to go back to like basic sales training or whatever. That
Right.
I mean, oddly, I've been in IT 30 years, and
Okay.
the first real job I had. This is sort of relevant.
Mhm.
Um, the owner of the company, it was a startup. She made everybody take a sales class, you know, like a seminar, and they were all
Okay.
about overcoming objections and this and this and this.
Oh, yes. I
And that's when I
recall.
knew I'm never going to be doing this. I'm just let me go be my nerd, you know, nerd out on the machines.
Right.
Um, but I mean, now I kind of remember a little bit of that, and so you end up having to figure out, you know, what's their current, you know, parents will a lot of times will say, "What's your kid's currency?" Um, your
Oh,
kid at
really?
6 might have a different currency. Maybe it's M&Ms. You know, when they're 3 or 2, and you're trying to get them to go on the
Oh,
potty,
like, what motivates them?
what's going to motivate them to do what you need them to do? And so that evolves over the decades.
Right.
That never even stops. Now we have to figure out, well, what's your currency?
I'll have
Well, I
to
want to make a
ask
lot
my
of
wife.
money and have a big car.
Yeah.
Okay, how are you going to get from here, where you are today, to the Ferrari that you think
Right.
you're going to have? Um, so,
That's interesting. I've
yeah.
never heard, believe it or, I mean, I'm only 6 years into this game, so maybe I just haven't heard it yet, but I've not heard anybody ask me, like, "What's your kid's currency?" But that's interesting, like an interesting way to think about it, especially in the context of financial independence,
Mhm.
because, currency is like cold and hard, like cold hard cash, right?
Right.
And there's not a lot, like there's not a lot of flexibility. It does what it does. I mean, and work with me here. Don't like all my libertarian peers. Don't be like, okay, what about inflation? And like, not that. Just like a dollar is a dollar, right? Like in a sense, And if I ask you if I want to buy something from you, if it's $5, it's $5, right? Like it's pretty. There's a pretty hard line on it, and I think personalities can kind of be that way in a way, but or as well, but you can, like you said, know your children and kind of, okay, if I go this route with this kid and I go this route with this kid. So give us some examples. You don't have to like name your kids or anything, but give us some examples of the different currencies that your kids have and how you approached maybe certain problems that you needed to solve.
Well, I'll probably just talk about my daughter, also known as Baby Bear.
Okay.
You know, we don't use names
Sure. Sure.
on the internet, but she has gone from I want to be a marine biologist to I want to be um, a welder,
Okay.
or I want to raise fish, or I want to do whatever. And so when she was talking about, I think I want to do marine biology. Now my daughter is super smart. Of course, every parent says that, but my daughter is arguably very bright and perhaps the least motivated of all four to
Okay.
to like start something. And she probably gets that a lot from me,
Right.
younger me. But uh, we, my wife and I had sat down with her and said, okay, if you want what you really want to do, you say you want to be a marine biologist. Let's break this down. What you want to do
Hmm.
is sit on a rubber boat in the Gulf of Mexico and tag sharks from the boat, or something that you see on. That's what the kids all, you know, they imagine. Oh,
Right.
I'll be a marine biologist. I'll do all this stuff, and they don't think about, you know, taking a million different water samples and looking at bacteria,
Right.
which is probably also
All the
part of
cool
it. But,
stuff you see on YouTube, that's what you
right.
wanna do.
And so we're like, okay, to get to that point, to be even considered,
Mhm,
you're going to have to go to a marine biology program at a college. So
mhm.
right now we're looking at, okay, UTEX is UT Corpus Christi,
Hmm.
UT Galveston, Wichita State. Who knew? But they have they have a marine biology. So we're like looking at this and saying, okay, that's a 4-year degree. It probably costs X.
Hmm.
Right now, since we had the conversation, it's probably 10% more. Um, and then you're going to need some graduate school because they're not going to take a bachelor's on the boat. All those people are like masters working on their PhDs. So you're going to
Right.
be at least a graduate. So, here's all this money you're going to be having to spend on school. And then while you're doing the internship, you're not making anything. And then at the end of it, you're probably going to make whatever the salary range was, and we're saying this is the reality. So if you want to do this, if you have a passion, we're not trying to kill your passion. We're just trying to say, let's frame this for planet Earth that we're
Right.
actually on. And then she decided maybe what she really wanted was to breed fish because she's always been a hobbyist. I had goldfish. Maybe we'll call it advanced goldfish
Okay. What's an
tank.
advanced goldfish?
Well, like not just those little 25-cent comets that you get at Walmart.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I did get a 25-cent comet to grow up to be about a $5 fish.
Oh,
He
okay.
was pretty.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Well, I don't know. Uh, but she kind of grew up seeing me fuss around with these fish, and now she's
Right.
got 2 or 3 tanks, and she's breeding these fish in her apartment, and
Mhm.
I think it's really cool. She sends me videos of the shrimp head babies and that kind of stuff. So she's really into that. But now maybe it's more realistically a hobby
Right.
or maybe a business opportunity in the future. But then she's like, um, after being confronted with the reality of college and money and things, now she's kind of, you know, I think maybe I'd try welding. And I'm like, yeah, really? Well, because we had kind of said, we don't care if you kids go to college or trade
Mhm.
school. We don't care.
Okay.
College is expensive. It's ridiculous right now. It is not going to offend your parents in the least if you all decide I'm going to go another way because
Okay.
it's just, that's a whole, maybe another episode. But I
Mhm.
went on a rant today because I went back and checked Oklahoma State's tuition and fees, and I don't know how people do it
Right. Well,
without
I think
being
that's
bribed
part
by the
of
government.
raising financially independent children, right? You have to make, especially when it comes to large, long-term purchases. So I know, like when I was growing up, and you probably remember this too, it was like, go to college, get a degree, get a degree. If you don't get a degree, you won't be able to be like, you won't be able to tell everybody that you're an MBA 14 times a day, right? And I'm sorry that I'm picking on my MBA friends, but the point being, that was like what we were told to do. And it was almost to the point where if you don't do that, what are you just going to be a homeless person? Was kind of
Right,
the attitude. People didn't really say it that way, but that was the attitude. However, now we've got how many kids out there that are, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they can't find, a job, or they can find a job and they're like, this only pays this much money. Like, what gives? And it's like, well, this is what happens when you make large purchases like this. The bill basically stays the same, maybe goes up, right? But that doesn't guarantee that you actually have a job in itself, just because you
hmm
have a nice hefty bill.
yeah. I have a cousin who's not young enough to be one of my kids, but kind of
Mhm.
like half generation back, and um, he got a degree in computer animation,
Mhm.
and I thought, okay, good luck getting that money back. But
Right.
he kind of proved to be the exception to the rule because he actually got a job in animation, and now he's literally credited on DreamWorks
Oh, wow.
uh, TV shows, stuff on Netflix and stuff like that. I'm going, huh, okay.
Right.
But for every one of him, there's kids with. The only reason I bring it up is he told me, like, I got like a $75,000 thing, and his payments were like $700 a month, and that was his student loan,
Mhm.
and that's basically, that used to be a house payment,
Right.
not that long ago, but he's actually very focused and driven to that. So that
Right.
worked for him. But I don't think most people, I think they go to college with, like you said, the idea that in their head that, well, and I got the same pressure in the 80s. My wife and I both went to school in the 80s,
Mhm.
and, we're squarely Gen X, and it was in the town I grew up in, which was like a bedroom community of Oklahoma City. It was, well, if you don't go to college, you can't be successful.
Right.
Maybe not a homeless person, but if you didn't go to college, your best bet was what? Are you going to go join the army?
Right.
And what options do you have if you don't? And I thought, I went off to school. I didn't take out a bunch of loans, but now I majored in something that I don't do anything with.
Right.
But at least I'm not in debt. I mean, I
Right.
was an English and German double major with an emphasis in literature and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So,
Right.
and then I ended up getting a job at an internet shop. So, and that skill set, that job that I do now is basically a skilled trade, like the electricians, like the
Mhm.
plumbers, like the people at Votech. It's just a very nerdy one.
Right.
And so they're still not teaching what I'm doing in college. Not really. You can get degrees that are approximate, but you were talking about all the people with the MBAs, and I've actually interviewed MBAs and I had to ask them, what can you do?
Right.
Or I'm sorry, not MBA particularly, but like the MIS information systems. I
The,
didn't go on that.
the tech
So
the technology version of an MBA.
right. Like if you're an IT manager kind of person, like,
Right.
but you don't know how to do any of the things. So how are you going to be successful as a, how did that degree help you?
Right.
Um, so we were all very supportive of the
Mhm.
trade schools, and it occurred to me also that when I was in high school German, one of
Mhm.
the things you do in a high school language class is you learn about the country a lot of times, right? So if
Mhm.
you're in Spanish, you'll learn about Spain and Mexico. If you're in French, well, we learned about German high schools and how they had two tracks. They had one track that was high school and one track that was basically geared to send people to trades. And in German culture at the time, that was fine. They were like, oh, he's going to be a car mechanic in Germany. That's a very respected, at the time we understood that to be a very respected profession because, say, the Germans really do dig cars,
Mhm.
um, things like that. So I thought, why aren't we doing? Now you're getting in the United States. Now we're getting with all the school choice stuff. We're getting a lot more pushback against the college or bust model. Like you're either going to college or you're just going to take your diploma and go, be a farmer.
Mhm.
Incidentally, being a farmer requires quite a bit of knowledge and expertise.
Right.
This is my
Well, I
family,
mean, being
but
successful in any
right,
particular way requires some level of, like, you have to at least learn about, the skill that you're trying to, whatever it is, whether it's being a farmer, whether it's writing code, which you don't necessarily have to go to college for, whether if you want to be a podcast bro, there is a lot to learn. There just is. Like, you have to learn all your technology. You've got to learn some of the techniques, some of the things that people do to help them be more successful. You've got to, perhaps you got to learn how to speak. Maybe you're the kind of person that you get behind a microphone and you have nothing to say, but you actually have lots to say, right? But you just don't know how to get it out. So you might have to learn, like, how do I operate in this medium. So any area where you're trying to, any endeavor where you're trying to do something, especially where you want that to be your living, that will provide you enough resources for, your living expenses, and then hopefully some, some stuff after that. Yeah, it's going to take a lot of work. As I found out the hard way.
right. And so we found out a lot of stuff the hard way, and now we're trying to get our kids to not do it the hard way.
Right.
They used to say in my brief period in the Marine Corps, it was you'll either work smarter or harder.
Right.
And of course, that was a trick. They always made you work hard anyway. But
Right. Right. Yeah.
the
And
the
wait.
idea was you can either learn to think or you're going to be really good at push-ups.
Right. Yeah.
So
I was good at both.
I just want our kids to take push the easy button. I'm here. Like
Right.
maybe it is this generation. I don't know, but it seems like different personalities. Like my daughter, I know my daughter is crazy about me, and I'm crazy about her.
Mhm.
I feel like a Jewish grandmother every now and then. Oh, would it hurt for you to call? You
Are you
know,
trying to make me feel?
uh,
Are you trying to make me feel guilty for not calling my dad
you
like
didn't
the last couple
call.
of weeks?
No, well, she did. She has started to call me and say, like today, she called me and says, "Hey, I'm trying to get a eye exam. And what do I do here?" I'm like, "Oh, well, you're on my VSP plan and this and this and this." And so
Right.
I explained it to her. Just make sure wherever you go is on VSP, and I'll get you the information.
Right.
Um, and it's just kind of funny because now some of the kids are starting to ask, "Hey, how do I do this?"
Right.
I got a question from my daughter's boyfriend. What's a copay? And I thought, okay, here we go.
It's
And I had to
funny.
explain, do not, under any circumstances, go to a clinic unless you know for a fact that they take Blue Cross, or you will walk out with a big, big bill that you don't
Right.
want.
It's
Uh,
it's funny how much our young people ask us, and we're like, it 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 seems like, yeah, I've known that for so many years that it seems kind of
mhm.
almost to the obvious point now, right? Especially like if it's different if your child is 6, right? Because it's easy to kind of keep in your mind. My child is 6; they don't know much. They've only had 6 years on this whole planet. It's and the way they talk and they interact, it helps reinforce that they don't know much. But then when they get older, because I used to mentor, so I don't have any older kids, but I used to mentor. And sometimes he'd ask me things and he's like 16, 17, and I'm like, well, duh. I'm in my mind, of course, but and so I imagine when I get to your point where my child is getting ready to leave and go off to maybe college or whatever, I'll be like, for real?
Yeah, you
It's
have to
just me that
suppress
gets me.
the how do you not know this? Because
Right.
you don't know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
if nobody's told you, you're just wandering around, blissfully ignorant.
Right. And if nobody told you, parents, who didn't tell you this? You? Oh. Uh-oh, Jay, I think you froze. Uh-oh. Jay has frozen. So we will give him a second to work that out. But I will try to fill in the air here while he is absent and working things out. He'll be back in just a moment. So my son is 6. We are slowly working on teaching him to be responsible with money. And recently, he gets library books from the school library, and then he is supposed to turn them back in, or he gets like I think it's like a 5-cent fine per day or something like that. I'm not really sure. And he likes this sweet treat Friday or something like that, and he owed like 75 cents. And so we're like, you got to pay for that. And he's got way more than 75 cents. I mean, it's not like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but for a little kid, it probably feels like $100 for him. And so we're like, you gotta pay 75 cents, and you don't get your sweet treat, because you are supposed to turn these books in. So we're trying to teach him responsibility, and we're trying to balance because at the same, on one hand, when they're 6, you want you want to give them lessons. And maybe it's just me, but I don't want the lesson to be too insanely harsh. Not at 6, right? Like not for something like that. I mean, if he were to, be mean to the dog and kick the dog, which he doesn't do, but if that were the case, then yeah, the punishment should be a little bit more difficult. But so we are teaching him, and I think it starts early on, and I believe that Jay is back. So let's see if we can't get him in the back up in here again. So let's see, what do we got here? Do we got him? Maybe. Let's see here. Give me a second. I think I know what's going on. No, is he there?
Was that me?
There
There we
you
go.
are. All right. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
So Jay is back. I can quit pontificating about, trying to raise my child financially independent at a whole 6 years old. Okay. So where were we? We were talking about, the challenges of, you know, being a little bit patient when they ask you a question that seems so simple to you. Like,
Right. Right.
how do I make an eye appointment? Is like, if I
Yeah.
had a kid, I would naturally want to say, find an eye doctor, call them up, ask them if they take this insurance, and then make an appointment. How hard is that? Right? But when I was 19 or 18 or whatever, I probably wouldn't have known either.
Right. Before the internet knocked me down or whatever, I was going to ask you, do you remember the old Saturday Night Live with Mike Myers? And he used to do this sketch called Middle Aged Man.
I don't. I don't.
So,
I
so
never was
middle
a
aged
Saturday Night Live fan, but
middle aged man was a superhero, but he got really tired when he tried to run. But he had the superpower of knowing how to do things.
mm, that's
And
funny.
so every time they did the bit, it was, the young couple. I don't know how we do this. How do we get a mortgage? And then middle aged man would show up out of nowhere and explain where to go and how to do this stuff at the bank, and they would all end
That's
it with
funny.
thanks, middle aged man. And now I've turned into that.
Right? I
Uh,
mean, I don't know about you, but I'm
yeah,
calling myself an old already.
right.
You know,
I'm in
I'm an
my
old.
I'm if mid 50s at this point,
All
and
right.
uh,
I'm 46, so I'm working my way up there. So I'm not really old, but
not really.
I make the joke about it. I'm
I,
just like, oh, I'm an old now, because
I've
like the
decided.
20-year-olds I am.
Right, right. I mean, 50's the new uh, 50 or whatever, right?
50's the new.
I don't know. Like you can say 50's the new 40, but your knees don't agree. Uh,
Right, right. Well,
anyway,
I mean, what's that joke like? Once you, oh, you're 40 now. Don't worry. Do you have any pains? No. One will be around shortly to help you out. Right.
shortly. Uh,
So, okay. So, have you had any? And I'm trying. I want to try to ask you questions, but at the same time, I want to respect privacy and all that. So
oh,
feel free to
sure.
just be like, yeah, we're not going to answer that question. Um, have you had any major issues that you've had to face and then kind of like hurdles to overcome? Like college kids going out and buying, thousands of dollars worth of pizza and then having to figure out how to pay the bill.
Nothing like that yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping we can avoid that whole I did something really dumb and I got
Mhm.
suckered in. And I mean, we have friends that have kids that have told horror stories about, oh, my kid ended up doing this thing and ended up owing $2,000, and
Mhm.
what are you going to do? So how do you work your kids? How do you guide your kid through that without uh, providing financial emergency care
Right.
to your own detriment? Because we've told the kids, we're not here to pay for all your stuff. We're not
Right.
not in that sense, but um, we're when make these choices. There's any number of ways that kids can pay for college, either working through it or maybe they have 529s from parents and family and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
So we haven't had to deal with anything like crazy. Uh, and I hope that, like I said, I hope that remains that way, knocking on Formica here.
Right.
But I mean, I'm trying to remember if I, horribly disappointed my parents. It didn't have anything to do with college, but I mean, sometimes life will just knock you down.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, I personally had a situation some years ago related to the 9/11 attack, where uh, my entire firm that I was working for just laid off almost everybody because they
Wow.
were involved with. This was a firm that did consulting for the three pillars of the Tulsa, at the time it was in Tulsa, the
Mhm.
Tulsa economy. And the three pillars of the Tulsa economy, if you don't know, DL, because Tulsa's famous, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh no, he froze again. Jay, you work in IT. You're supposed to have better internet. Hope he didn't hear me say that. I think he'll be back in a second. We'll work it out. We will get through this, folks. All right. So he's dropped, but he will be back. So what he was talking about was the three pillars, for which I have no idea what were. And I cannot come up with something off the cuff about three pillars related to any particular city. But we'll just kind of keep that on the top of our head for once he jumps back in. We'll see if hopefully we can, finish out the show without too many more interruptions. But we deal with what we've got to deal with. And I think this is a fabulous conversation. We should always be mindful as parents about, just raising our kids and just knowing who our children are and where is the end goal for them? Where do we want them to be? Where do we want them to be when they're 18? Where do we want them to be when they're 20 and 21 and 25 and 30? Right? Like, what are the things that we can do to help get them there? And some of that may be front loading it when they're younger. So, for instance, my son is 6. I was telling you the story earlier about how we didn't really punish him. We just said, hey, you got money, so you got to pay this bill. So, this kind of introduces him early on to the fact that there are consequences, sometimes financial consequences, for not doing certain things. And those are the kind of things that if you can front load them and help your children out, then by the time they get to 18, in their mid 20s, hopefully they won't come to you saying, hey, I lost my job and I'm, so far in debt, I have to file bankruptcy. Not saying that I know anybody that had to do that, but there might be somebody on this show right now that had to do that. All right. So Jay, looks like he's coming back. We'll see if we can't get him here. And then he can tell me about, let's see here. Let's see. I think it's just working on getting him in. I think that's what it is. Like, I just have to sit and wait for him to show back up, I guess. So we'll see. But it looks like he's backstage and it's doing its thing. So we'll figure this out. But anyway, so yeah, we want to raise our kids, and we have to realize that at some point everything is new to them, right? And a lot of it is based on experience. And so we have to start thinking, like, how can we introduce this? How can we talk about this? How can we have this conversation? And I think one of the struggles that a lot of American families have, and I can't speak for families outside of America, but in America, it seems to me that money tends to be a taboo topic. And I think, at least within the family dynamic, it's a good thing if you kind of take it out of the taboo area and put it into, hey, as a family, we're going to discuss money. That doesn't mean you have to necessarily go out and be like, all right, children, here's our net worth. Oh, look, Jay is back. You there, sir? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what is going on. I have intervened as much as I care to on my broadband router, but I don't know if it's that or if AT&T just decided that today would be the first time in 3 years that they had issues.
The Matrix is attacking us.
That's it. They don't want this out there.
That's Folks, if you know, you know. Subtle reference there.
Broadband connection has been restarted.
Okay.
So let's hope that that makes my fiber happy. Now I don't remember where we were. We were talking about kids and
Yeah, and we were
kids and stuff.
it's funny when you dropped, I said it like several times. I was like, all right, we'll remember this. And then I went into something else, and I shouldn't have done that, because the moment I shift gears in my mind and I start talking about something else,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I was talking about just kind of gets booted, like, oh, didn't need that one. So, so that was a mistake on my part, but no worries. Oh, 3 pillars. Yeah. Somebody was talking about, you were going to tell us about the three.
So I get
Thank
after
you,
that.
my VA lady,
Yes,
for, 3 pillars.
after 9/11, Tulsa basically fell apart, and I was working at the time as a security information security consultant for this firm, and our firm was not that big, and we serviced all of these big clients around Tulsa, and nobody was helping, nobody was hiring, nobody was. So I got laid off, and the whole my whole financial picture just kind of crumbled.
Hmm.
I had to work a deal with mom and dad, and here I am at 30, 35. Having to get assistance from your parents is not fun.
Right.
I did pay it all back, so that's kind of the thing. Um,
Was it embarrassing?
oh yeah,
Was it?
yeah.
Because
I mean,
I feel like there's, just watching and observing it, it seems like the newer generation coming up does not find that necessarily embarrassing.
I
I can't be
yeah. I
sure, but
mean,
it feels that
I
way.
had just the part of the problem was I had just been climbing in the IT career at the time in the '90s. I don't know if you um, it was kind of a gypsy culture, almost like a mercenary culture. So if
Right.
you were good at things, you could go from job to job and make a
Right.
little more each time you moved. And I had finally gotten to the point where I was making some actual money,
Mhm.
and kaboom. So getting through that, and that was when I was married previously, so it's not the current spouse. So there's always the other issue is, dynamics between spouses
Mhm.
are a huge predictor of whether you're going to be able to weather these storms and figure out how to get around some of these difficulties. And so uh, that may be another angle, when you're talking to your kids, if they're with somebody and they think they're going to get married, or they have a partner and that.
Oh, no. Oh, no. He froze again. He froze. No. All right. Well, we'll have to, folks, we will, apologies for the interruption here. It is what it is. We deal with it. See, what was the story? So I will tell you, it sounded like he was hinting. Well, he didn't really hint. He said, in his 30s, he had to get some assistance from his parents. In my late 20s, oh, there he is. He's back. We don't have to tell my story. We can tell his. Are you there? Oh, great. We got the internet back, but not Jay. Oh, no. Things are really wonky now. We got the internet, but not the person. It's a wild show, folks. We'll see what's going on. So I'll tell my story. So in my mid-20s, I had accrued quite a bit of debt on the credit card because what did I do? I would be like, "Oh, charge it, charge it," you know. And and I remember I had some cool stuff, and this girl was like, "How you get all that?" I was like, "Dude, they just let me buy this on the credit card." I was being really stupid. I was like totally not in any way, shape, or form financially astute at all. It was terrible. And then I had a good job, and I was able to pay for it all, my regular monthly payments. So I didn't even pay it all off necessarily. Another mistake that I made. There were quite a few mistakes if I look back. And then I ended up getting fired from a decent job, and I had no money. So I went from decent money, could pay all my bills, to no money, couldn't pay my bills, and I couldn't get a comparable job at the time. And then eventually, just it didn't take long before it spiraled out of control for me. And so my dad was like, "Dude, you got to file bankruptcy." And I was really embarrassed because I was like, "No, I don't want to file bankruptcy. Like that's what losers do." It's kind of like my attitude, and it's a nice attitude to have, but there was a certain reality I had to face. So I had to face that. And then once I came back from that, I learned my lesson. And I was like, I treated a credit card the way I should have in the first place. I was like, I will not pay for anything that I cannot immediately pay for. I will not charge anything that I cannot immediately pay for right now. 100%. Not doing it. Not going on the credit card. That way I can always pay it off at any time. Like, yep, I only spent what I actually had in the bank. And so that's the way I started treating it. And then I went further, and I would actually, when the bill came due, I would pay the entire balance, not the balance from the prior, from the prior month or whatever, from the prior billing statement. I paid the entire balance. And it was just because I was so paranoid. And I was like, this is not going to happen to me again. I refuse to have to file bankruptcy. I don't know. I guess Jay's not coming back. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe he's restarting his equipment. So, oh, there he is. Look at that. He popped right back in like a ninja.
I nuked my broadband router completely. So we'll
All
see
right.
if that cleans it up. But really, this is really, really strange because this just does not happen like
Right.
ever. Sometimes the Wi-Fi bl- flitzes out a little bit, but this is like the whole fiber connection going down.
Right.
Which, like, I've had AT&T fiber for 3-4 years now, and when I first got it, it was a little bumpy, and then it's been rock solid since then until today.
I'm telling you, the Matrix doesn't want to hear this
It
story.
is the Matrix.
That's
What's the
that's right.
deal?
So,
Darn
Agent, whatever his name
Matrix
is.
Smith.
Yeah, Smith. That's it, Agent Smith. Like, it's an inevitability. That's what it is. So, okay, so the 3 pillars. What are the 3 pillars?
All right.
Before you get
So
kicked off again, tell me the 3 pillars, just name them.
Tulsa, America. Tulsa was called the oil capital back in the day. So
Okay.
all like Phillips Petroleum, all these places, that's what built Tulsa. So Tulsa has always been a part of the energy sector, huge part of the energy sector. And then they got into communications, and there's a lot of aerospace out of Tulsa. There's some
Okay.
Boeing action there. There's a company called Norton that makes fuselages for Embraer. All of this action going on in Tulsa, and it's all centered around a few things. It's not as diverse as Oklahoma City. So when those 3 pillars kind of got bumped all at the same time, everybody shed employees. Nobody was hiring. Our firm had to basically fold.
Mhm.
And that's what happened, financially. I'm like, whoops. Now, if I had been following the Dave Ramsey plan, would it have
Mhm.
been a little easier to deal with? Yeah, we probably would have had money in the bank. And
Right.
so I want that to be a cautionary tale to the kids and say, look, forget about Dave talking about the Bible all the time. Dave talks about things like 3 to 6 months of expenses in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
bank, liquid
Right.
cash. If I had had that, I could have gracefully exited my lease at the place we were renting because I'd only been there like a year.
Mhm.
My wife at the time and I, which uh, would have possibly been able to come back closer to home. Our family had a house. Family had an extra house that I was living in. It was an investment property that I had been living in and paying, renting from the folks. So they were able to just say, just come back and you can stay in the house. Just pay
Mhm.
the utilities. Don't worry about it. Okay. So we were fortunate enough to be at that point.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, we're not, upper middle class even, but through a series of unfortunate events and insurance settlements, we had this property, and so that helped us out a lot. And
Right.
then, so I was able to kind of slowly build up. Um, and I don't want to be on here talking about my ex. That's not what the point of this story
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
But to have somebody who's a spouse or a significant other that is financially at least compatible with you is critical. You can't um, you can't make headway. You can't row the boat in 2 different directions, right? The canoe is going to go
Right.
one direction or the other. And so my wife now and I are pretty much totally on the same page as far as this goes.
Right.
I'm the one that's been forced into financial discipline through being beat over the head by
Mhm.
life
Mhm. Sure.
a few times. Um, and so we're very, we feel like, the crazy hermit preacher, repent,
Right.
repent,
You
the end
know,
is near, so, uh,
it's interesting that you mentioned the financial compatibility because I don't think anybody's ever really talked about it. But and I try to keep this a relatively family friendly show, but
mhm,
we'll broach into it a little bit. A lot of people like to talk about sexual compatibility, and that's like a conversation I've heard ad nauseum. Like, oh, are you sexually
mhm.
compatible? You got to test drive the Ferrari, blah blah blah. All these arguments, right? And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, "Hey, are you financially compatible?" And because when you look at divorces, I think money
What are
is at
they?
the top
What are
one
they
one of
all
the top
about? They're all
things,
about
right?
money.
Money,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And a lot of couples fight. Like when you hear, like, I'm not saying that couples don't fight about intimacy or they don't have issues with intimacy. What I am saying is that when you hear the stories, just like what I like to do is I like to think, what am I hearing organically? That to me is kind of, if that's a worthwhile observation. What do I hear organically? Organically, I hear that people seem to be worried about intimacy and the compatibility there. But I also hear a lot about people fighting, actual couples fighting over finances. And so it's interesting that you bring up this idea of financial compatibility because, like, when I first met my wife, she didn't want to open the books. Like when we first met, she was like, "I'm not showing you my books yet." We're not, like,
Right.
even when we were dating, she's like, "Nope. Once we get serious, then yeah, we'll have a conversation." And so I think there's a certain value that maybe that's one of the things that really, as parents, we need to really bump up the list to be like, "Look, we're not
Hmm.
gonna really talk to you too much about intimacy, but we talk to you
Well,
about finances."
and there's of course there's interplay between all of the elements. Like I found, again, I'm not trying to go. This isn't Dear Abby or anything. Uh,
Dear DL.
dear DL, which by the way, I imagine DL stands for uh, like Darius Leonidas in my head.
That
So is that
means
is that pretty
nice.
close?
I mean, if Daniel Leroy is
I'm
close.
kidding.
Daniel
Well,
meaning judge, Leroy meaning king. Just throwing that out there.
fair enough. Um, uh, you might find your. Let's just say you might find yourself a couple, and it could be either the man or either partner. We'll just say
Mhm,
that either partner could find themselves in a situation where they're in love. They realize there's a problem, and you'd rather feel the financial pain than the emotional pain of hitting that problem head on.
mhm,
Maybe in a lot of ways, maybe you had a partner that had a substance abuse problem. It's very similar,
mhm.
substance abuse to like spending.
Right. I
Think
mean,
about
people
this.
people
It's
are
the
gamblers.
same. It's the same psychology in a lot of
Right.
ways.
And
Same
gambling
behaviors.
has destroyed marriages and homes, right?
Right.
Like,
So
and spending as well, but gambling is the more
I'm not
obvious.
saying my last marriage ended because she was in Vegas gambling or anything like
Right,
that. I'm
right. No,
just giving an example of.
that's just the easiest example for
Mhm.
people to recognize.
So for you kids out there, make sure, and a lot of it is your spouse going into the marriage that you're neither one of you are going to have, if especially if you're in your 20s, you're probably not going to have a lot of experience dealing with money or any of that stuff.
Mhm.
And it's not like anybody expects you to be, uh, you know, Charles Schwab out of the gate, right? But a willingness
Mhm.
and the emotional maturity to be able to delay gratification is, I mean, and that's just a growing up thing. And I think
Right.
that's why young kids, people in college, people in their 20s, and we've kind of, as a society, I think we've delayed adolescence even further in some
Mhm.
aspects. So maybe that's an explanation.
Right.
But I think it's not like I invented this quote. I said the other day on the Twitter, um, whatever the kids are calling it. Uh,
Right.
the ability to delay gratification is a huge indicator for financial solvency later in life.
Right.
So if you can
Yes.
convince the kids, if you could save a little now, I'm not telling you to put half your paycheck in there. If you could shave off 5 or 10%,
Mhm.
maybe you just got a raise. Pretend you didn't get the raise. Just
Mhm. Mhm.
throw a
Mhm.
little bit in that account because you're practically, you're trying not to yell at the kids saying, "Look, you're 20. Do you know how many doubles you'll hit that I
Right.
didn't get to hit?" You know,
Right.
so if you actually just put it in a market fund, even if you don't want to deal with it,
Right.
you're trying to beat inflation first of all. So, which interestingly, that's one of our little victories is we've had. Um, I think two of them now have decided, okay, we'll open a high yield savings. They're all. I'm getting told that it's all four of the kids now have agreed to do high yield savings.
Nice.
Uh, by the way, don't be afraid to go to Discover Bank or Barclay Bank or SoFi or any of these other places and throw your money out there. We had money in the credit union. It's earning like 0.5%,
Mhm.
and the online places are offering up to 4.5 in some cases. And
Right.
it's not just the kids. I had to explain that to my mother.
Right.
She didn't. I mean, she's in her 80s. She doesn't know about online savings. So
Sure, sure.
I convinced her to put. I have a CD and it's earning me 4. I'm like, okay, well, what if I told you you could just put your money in 4% account and don't deal with CDs and having to worry about when that matures and comes back? Because CD, you deposit it, you have to leave it for 12, 18 months, and then you get it back with the
Right.
money added, with the interest added. In a lot of cases, you can just put the money in the Barclay online tiered savings account. And yeah, it's a slightly harder to get your money out in that it takes an extra day
Right.
to wire it back. That's all. But if it's a savings account, who cares?
Right.
Um, so, I
Okay.
mean, it's
So
just small victories like that. We're telling the
absolutely.
kids, hey, at least you're not losing money. Inflation, CPI, you don't even have to know. Just know that everything gets about 3% more expensive on average every year.
Right. Right.
And that's because of the government. And that's why you should hate the government. You got to throw that in there.
Right. Yeah, always. Right. It's that meme. It's like 7 things that children should always hear, right, from their parents. And you go down the
Right.
list, and like number 6 is like communism is bad or something like
Right.
that. All right, so we're getting close to our time. So I want 2
Sure.
things. The second thing what I like to do, and I told you about it. I will ask you just a general question, from somewhere that I've seen, and you get to answer. And then I don't respond at all. It's just that's your answer. But before we get to that, so if you were to summarize, for financial independence, give me a few things, a few lessons that you think are critical teaching your kids as they grow up. And it could be at any age. And then a few resources for maybe parents that are like, look, I didn't learn financial independence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not financially independent. In fact, I occasionally tune into Dave Ramsey, but what are some good resources for them if they want to improve their financial literacy?
So and I'm not a child psychologist, but for your first point, how to teach kids early, because you have a 6-year old, there are probably ways where you can start to train him in a little bit of gratification delay.
Mhm.
Like, and there's always these psychological tests that are like, okay,
The
if you
marshmallow
don't,
or cookie test?
yeah, the marshmallow, the cookie, if you wait, I'll give you 2 cookies in an hour. And then they
Mhm.
go, oh, okay. So that's one way of doing it. And you could probably scale that up as they get older. As far as, oh, there's a comment. Look at that. As far as resources for parents, I will just say that the easy button is this is going to sound kind of lame, but the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University, you know, uh, anybody can do it. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to do that. But
Right.
you can even get the paid Financial Peace University. There's certain websites, there's churches and other, like,
They should get the homeschool.
it's like a nonprofit. I know there's a nonprofit that will actually pay for it for you. And their
Okay.
whole mission is to get people trained on this. And that's for
Okay.
any age, right? High school and up. So
Right. Okay.
I'll maybe see if I can get you a link and you can post it
Sure.
later.
Absolutely.
Homeschool program for parents, whether they're homeschooling or not.
And there's also, I'm being told, there's homeschool programs for parents and things like that. So if you're doing homeschool
or not.
or not, you don't have to
Supplemental,
be a
right?
homeschooler. You could just, maybe your district or your state doesn't do
Mhm.
financial literacy. You
Right.
got to get that in front of
Not
those
a maybe,
kids.
almost definitely.
You've got to get it in front of them. Yeah.
So,
Before
okay.
college. Okay.
Awesome. All right. So for our dad question at the end. So what I like to do, folks, I will go and I will find something maybe on a dad group on Facebook or something that I've seen on Twitter or wherever. And I just ask. So I actually have 2. I'm not going to give you both of them. So you just choose 1 or 2, and then I won't feel bad for whichever one you choose.
All right.
You gonna choose?
Let's go with 2. What's
All
2?
right.
Did I
All
make the
right.
right choice?
Well, it depends on how you see things. So Andrew Tate is all the rage right now. And he was on the Patrick Bet David podcast recently.
I
And they
heard.
asked him, because allegedly he has sons and daughters. He supposedly has like a pile of kids, whatever. I don't know. But supposedly he has some daughters. And one of the questions that they asked him, they said, if your daughter met a guy just like you, who was, had some girlfriends on the side, how would you handle that? And I'll tell you his answer, and then you can tell me how your answer is. So his answer was, well, if the guy is, doing well, he's successful, he's, meeting all of her needs, I would tell her not to worry about the small things. It's not quite what he said, but that's basically what he said. He was basically like, look, man's got to do what a man's got to do. And if he's paying all your bills, quit worrying about it. That was his perspective. So what would your answer be in contrast to somebody like Andrew Tate?
What's the opposite of what he said? If I have a daughter and she's dating somebody like that,
Well, she's married, or
or
she's married. Well, it could be married or dating. I can't remember the
whatever
exact.
it is, they're in some sort of committed thing. I would
Right,
be.
they're in a committed relationship.
Oh, good grief! How do you go about getting your daughter out of that situation without making them dig their heels in? Right, number one. But no, good grief, no. Don't worry about the small things. That's not the small things. That is the biggest things. Those are the biggest things. Fidelity. You don't have, like I said, you don't have to subscribe to Old Testament principles or proverbs on marriage, but I think all the normal people, I hope, are thinking, oh, hell no. Sorry,
Right.
was I not supposed to say that on
You're
Family
good.
Show?
You're good. You're good.
No, just no. I'd be like channeling Liam Neeson at this point. If a person has a set of
I will
skills,
find you.
the lake behind the house is deep.
Right.
That kind of thing. Good grief.
I don't know why your boyfriend hasn't called you in the last 14 days. I don't know why nobody
I
can
mean,
thank him.
you have to, obviously you have to go through your kid. You have to go through
Right.
your daughter and convince her that it is completely 100% safe for you to leave. And I encourage you to do so. And you can stay with us. You can do whatever you need to do, but get away from that man.
All right. Fair enough. All right, Jay, we're at our time here.
All right.
Any final words on financial independence before I close the show out, and I'll put you backstage in here in just a moment.
I don't know if I have anything final to say, but just what will help the kids, as in anything that you want them to do, is you need to model the behavior yourself. You can't be having pizza all the time and wondering where you're going to get money for your car payment, and then say y'all need to be doing Dave Ramsey.
Right.
So the best thing is to be is to model the behavior you want to see in your kids, and then just make sure they know that you support them and love them unconditionally. Awesome. And hope for the best. That's all we can do.
Sounds good. I'm going to put you backstage. If you want to hang out for a second, I'll be right there. So just hold tight there. All right, folks. I hope that you enjoyed this show. Hope you enjoyed the episode here. I'm going to mute him real quick. There we go. I muted him real quick because we don't want to get a hot mic on him. But thank you for tuning in. And I want you to remember, this is my dad talk is my way of raising dad voices. So if you're a dad or a dad that has something they want to talk about in the context of being a dad, reach out, let me know, because we want to get you on the show. If you're a dad and you're like, hey, DL, I've already reached out to you and you've not made this happen, please reach out again, because I promise you, I'm just that bad at scheduling, but I am working on it. I'm doing a lot of things to try to improve, because here at the Liberty Dad Show, we don't accept I'm old, I'm set in my ways. You still have to keep working hard and trying to improve yourself. So I will continue to work hard and try to improve myself in the areas for where I am deficient. But if you're a dad, let me know, because I want to bring you on. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your product, you know what? Let me just do the closing, because I recorded it. Now I've forgotten it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.